This is not a hypothetical. This is not a scenario that experts are warning might happen someday in the future. This is happening right now. As you are watching this video, there is an active war in the Middle East that has the entire global energy system on the edge of a complete collapse. And the country that started this chain reaction, the country whose actions are now threatening to plunge billions of people across Asia into an energy crisis unlike anything the modern world has ever seen, is not some small regional player. This is a conflict involving the United States of America, Israel, and Iran. And right at the center of it all is a 33-kilometer strip of water called the Strait of Hormuz. Let me tell you exactly what has happened, where things stand today, and why you, whether you live in Pakistan, India, China, Japan, South Korea, Bangladesh, or anywhere across Asia, should be deeply, genuinely alarmed right now. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched surprise airstrikes on multiple sites across Iran, killing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and several senior Iranian officials. Just think about what that means for a moment. The Supreme Leader of Iran, the man who had held the most powerful position in that country for over 3 decades, was killed in a military strike. That is not a small event, that is a tectonic shift in the entire Middle East. Iran responded immediately by launching waves of missiles and drone strikes against Israel, U.S. military bases, and U.S. allied countries across the region. And right now, as of today, that war is still going. It has been going for 24 days, and there is no ceasefire, no end in sight, and no guarantee that it does not get dramatically worse before it gets better. Now here is the part that should make every single person in Asia stop and pay attention. Iran has shut the Strait of Hormuz, not partially, not as a warning. It has shut it down, and the near-total halt of traffic through that waterway, through which roughly 1/5 of all the oil and liquefied natural gas on the planet normally flows, has created a catastrophic disruption in global energy markets. 1/5 of all the oil on the planet, gone, blocked, strangled by a war that most people in Asia are watching from a distance as if it is someone else's problem. It is not someone else's problem. It is your problem. It is our problem. And the longer this goes on, the worse it is going to get. Let us understand why the Strait of Hormuz is so critical, because without understanding that, you cannot understand the scale of what is unfolding. The strait sits between Iran on one side and Oman and the United Arab Emirates on the other. It is the only exit point from the Persian Gulf. Every single barrel of oil produced in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, and Iran itself has to pass through this narrow waterway to reach the rest of the world. There is no pipeline alternative that can replace this volume. There is no other route. If the strait is closed or functionally blocked, that oil simply does not move. And right now, Iran has done exactly that. Trump threatened to destroy Iran's power plants unless Tehran reopened the strait within 48 hours. His exact message was blunt, aggressive, and unprecedented in its directness. Iran's response was equally blunt. Tehran said it would close the strait indefinitely, attack regional energy infrastructure, and that any strike on Iranian power plants would be met with attacks on power plants across Israel and across every country in the region that is hosting American forces. This is not two countries trading words. This is two nuclear-capable powers and their allies threatening to dismantle the energy infrastructure of an entire region while the world watches and oil prices go vertical. Oil prices have risen around 45% since this war began. Crude has topped $110 a barrel and briefly touched $114. The International Energy Agency, which is the most credible energy body on the planet, has warned that the global economy is facing a threat worse than the 1970s oil shocks. Worse than the 1970s. Let that sink in. The 1970s oil crisis caused recessions across the entire developed world. It caused fuel rationing. It caused inflation that took years to bring under control. It fundamentally changed how governments thought about energy security. And we are now being told that what is unfolding today is worse than that. So let us talk about Asia specifically, because this is where the real human cost of this crisis will be felt. China, Japan, South Korea, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia. All of these countries are sitting in the direct blast radius of what is happening at the Strait of Hormuz right now. Start with China. China is the world's largest importer of crude oil, and the overwhelming majority of that oil comes from exactly the countries that are now cut off by the Strait's closure: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait. All of it moves through those 33 kilometers of water. Stocks in China and Hong Kong are already recording some of their worst losses in nearly a year. The word being used by economists to describe what China is heading toward is stagflation. That word is critical. Stagflation means inflation going up while economic growth slows down or stops. It is the worst possible combination for any economy, and China's manufacturing-driven model is uniquely vulnerable to exactly this scenario. When energy gets more expensive and less available, factories slow down. When factories slow down, exports drop. When exports drop, growth collapses. And when China's growth collapses, every country in Asia that sells to China or buys from China feels that pain directly. That means almost everyone. China does have strategic petroleum reserves, and it has been aggressively filling them for years because Beijing has long understood this vulnerability. But reserves only last so long. Even the most optimistic estimates put China's strategic reserves at around 80 to 100 days of import coverage. After that, the situation becomes critical. And if this war drags on for months, which at this point looks entirely possible, China will be in genuine energy distress before the summer is over. Japan is in an even more precarious position. Japan has virtually no domestic energy resources. It imports almost everything it burns. Its oil comes overwhelmingly from the Middle East, and its liquefied natural gas supply, which heats Japanese homes and powers Japanese industries, comes significantly from Qatar, which sits right behind the Strait of Hormuz. Japan's economy is already fragile. It has been dealing with decades of slow growth, a shrinking population, and the ongoing challenge of restarting its nuclear industry after the Fukushima disaster. An energy shock of this scale would hit Japan like a hammer. Industrial production would fall. Electricity prices would spike. The kind of crisis energy rationing that Japan has not seen since the 1970s would be back. And this time, it would be worse because Japan's economy is more complex, more energy dependent, and more integrated into global supply chains than it was 50 years ago. South Korea is in a nearly identical situation. South Korea is home to some of the world's largest steel mills, the biggest shipyards on the planet, and a massive petrochemical industry. All of those industries are energy-intensive in the extreme. South Korea imports the majority of its crude from the Middle East and is one of the top importers of LNG globally, most of it from Qatar. If that supply is cut off or severely disrupted, South Korean industry does not just slow down, it risks shutting down entirely in certain sectors. And given that companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and POSCO are woven into global supply chains for everything from semiconductors to automobiles, the impact of South Korea's industrial slowdown would radiate across the planet. Now, let us talk about India, because India's situation carries a different kind of weight. India is the world's third largest importer of crude oil. Its economy is in the middle of a major expansion, and that expansion is hungry for energy. India sources a very large share of its oil from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and the UAE, all of which must now navigate a closed strait. India also imports significant quantities of LNG. If this supply is cut off or priced out of reach, India's refining industry takes a hit, its transportation sector grinds, its agricultural sector, which depends heavily on diesel-powered machinery, struggles, and its rapidly growing manufacturing base stalls. Indian inflation, which is already a political pressure point, would spike hard and fast. The rupee would come under severe pressure. And for a country where hundreds of millions of people live on tight daily margins, an energy shock of this scale does not just show up as a number on an economic chart. It shows up as hunger, as heat, as hospitals running out of power, as farmers unable to irrigate their crops. Pakistan does not even need a prolonged crisis to fall apart. Pakistan's economy has been on life support for years. It is dependent on imported energy has minimal foreign exchange reserves, and its government has been lurching from one IMF bailout to the next. A sustained energy price shock triggered by the Strait of Hormuz closure would simply collapse Pakistan's remaining economic stability. Fuel prices would become unaffordable for ordinary people. Power outages, which are already a daily reality for most Pakistanis, would become severe and extended. Industry would shut down. Unemployment would spike. And social unrest would follow because it always does when people cannot afford to feed their families or keep the lights on. Bangladesh is another country that does not get enough attention in these conversations but would be devastated just as quickly. Bangladesh's entire economic model is built around its garment industry, which employs millions of workers, the majority of them women, and which requires reliable and affordable energy to function. That industry runs on imported fuel. If fuel prices double or triple because of what is happening at the Strait of Hormuz, Bangladeshi factories become uneconomical almost overnight. Orders go to other countries. Workers lose jobs. An economy that has made remarkable development progress over the past 2 decades starts going backwards. And then there are countries like Sri Lanka, which only just began recovering from its catastrophic 2022 economic collapse, a collapse that was itself partly triggered by a foreign exchange and energy crisis. Sri Lanka cannot absorb another energy shock. The Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand all have growing middle classes and expanding industrial bases that are deeply dependent on affordable energy. A sustained disruption of Persian Gulf oil and gas flows would reverse years of development progress for all of them. Now let us talk about the mechanism of how this closure is actually unfolding and how long it could realistically last, because this is where the situation becomes even more alarming. Iran has not simply announced a closure and sent a few ships to block the entrance. Iran has been systematically making the strait impossible for commercial shipping to operate safely. It has deployed naval mines, which are among the most difficult and time-consuming threats to neutralize. It has positioned anti-ship missiles along its coastline. Its Revolutionary Guard naval forces are conducting operations in the Gulf. And Iranian drone and missile strikes have already hit energy infrastructure in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, sending a clear message that the entire Gulf energy system is now a target. Kuwait's Mina Al Ahmadi refinery, one of the largest in the Middle East and capable of processing 730,000 barrels of oil per day, was struck by Iranian drones and set on fire. Qatar's energy infrastructure has been threatened. Saudi Arabia has reported ballistic missiles targeting Riyadh. The UAE has intercepted an Iranian ballistic missile targeting Abu Dhabi. Iran has attacked the South Pars gas field, which is Qatar's most important energy asset and one of the largest natural gas fields in the entire world. These are not warning shots. This is Iran systematically demonstrating that it can and will attack the energy infrastructure of every Gulf country that hosts American forces or supports the US-Israel campaign. The insurance market for ships transiting the Persian Gulf has essentially collapsed. War risk premiums have become so astronomical that most commercial shipping companies have simply stopped sending their vessels through. You do not need Iran to physically block every ship. You just need to make the risk calculation so extreme that shipping companies make the rational decision to avoid the area entirely. That is what has happened. The strait is functionally closed not because every ship is being stopped, but because no rational shipping company is willing to risk a billion-dollar tanker and its crew in waters where missiles, mines, and drones are active. The United States' Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain and has been conducting operations in the region. But even American military power has very real limits when it comes to reopening a strait that Iran has mined and is actively defending with missiles. Sweeping mines is extraordinarily slow and dangerous work. Dealing with Iran's layered coastal defense systems takes time. And every day that passes is another day that tankers are not moving, oil is not flowing, and the energy pressure on Asian economies is intensifying. Trump gave Iran a 48-hour ultimatum to reopen the strait or face strikes on its power grid. Iran responded by saying it would close the strait indefinitely. Then Trump announced a 5-day pause, claiming the two sides were holding productive conversations. Iran immediately denied this, calling Trump's claim an attempt to manipulate energy markets and buy time. This is the chaos that is now governing the global energy system. A 48-hour ultimatum, a 5-day pause, denials from Tehran, threats from Washington, and in the middle of all of this, Asian economies are trying to figure out where their next barrel of oil is coming from. Because here is the brutal reality that no amount of diplomatic posturing changes. Every day that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, the oil that Asian countries need to function is not arriving. Strategic reserves are being drawn down, prices are going up. And the longer this continues, the harder the landing becomes when the crisis eventually ends, because by that point refineries will have run low, industries will have slowed or shut down, and the process of restarting everything takes time and money that many Asian economies simply do not have. There is also a second dimension to this crisis that goes beyond oil and gas, and that is food. People often forget that modern agriculture is an energy-intensive enterprise. Fertilizers are made from natural gas. Tractors, irrigation pumps, and harvesting equipment run on diesel. The supply chains that move food from farms to cities depend on fuel. When energy prices spike at this scale, food prices follow. And when food prices spike across Asia, the countries that feel it first and hardest are the ones with the least margin for error. Pakistan, Bangladesh, parts of India, Indonesia, the Philippines. These are countries where a significant portion of household income already goes to food. A 30 or 40% rise in food prices is not an inconvenience. It is a humanitarian crisis. Now, some people will point out that the world has alternatives, that American shale oil can fill some of the gap, that Russia can increase its exports, that some pipeline routes exist that bypass the Strait. All of that is true to varying degrees, but none of it is sufficient or fast enough to replace what the Strait normally carries. American shale production cannot instantly scale up by several million barrels a day. Russian oil comes with its own geopolitical complications and sanctions regimes. Alternative pipeline routes from the Gulf have limited capacity. The world's spare production capacity, which provides a cushion in normal disruptions, was never designed to compensate for the loss of 1/5 of global supply. Nothing was. This scenario was always considered the worst case precisely because there is no adequate backup plan. What makes the current situation uniquely dangerous compared to previous Hormuz crises is the combination of factors all hitting at the same time. You have an active shooting war, not just a threat. You have Iran's supreme leader dead, meaning the Iranian government is in a period of internal transition, and whoever takes power next may have even less incentive to negotiate a quick resolution. You have Trump's transactional and unpredictable style of diplomacy creating a situation where nobody, not Asian governments, not energy companies, not financial markets, can make reliable forecasts about what happens next. You have Iranian missiles already striking Gulf energy infrastructure across multiple countries. And you have a global oil market that was already dealing with other pressures before any of this started. The human cost of what is happening in Iran right now is also something that needs to be stated clearly. Over 1,500 civilians have been killed in Iran by US and Israeli airstrikes as of day 24 of this war. More than 18,000 people have been injured. Children are among the dead. Hospitals have been hit. Residential buildings have been flattened. Entire city blocks have been destroyed. This is a catastrophe unfolding inside Iran that the world is not paying enough attention to because of the noise of oil prices and geopolitical maneuvering. And Iran's retaliation strikes have killed people in Israel, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Iraq. This war is already costing enormous numbers of human lives, and it is not over. For Asia, the question right now is not whether this is going to hurt. It is already hurting. The question is how much worse it is going to get and how long it is going to last. Governments across Asia are scrambling. Emergency energy cabinet meetings are being held. Strategic reserves are being assessed. Alternative supply routes are being explored. Emergency diplomatic channels are being activated. But none of these measures can replace the simple, brutal fact that 1/5 of the world's oil supply is stuck behind a closed gate. And the key to that gate is in the hands of a country that is currently under active military attack and has absolutely nothing to lose by keeping it shut. There is no comfortable ending to this video because there is no comfortable reality right now. What is happening at the Strait of Hormuz is not a distant geopolitical story. It is an active emergency with direct, immediate consequences for every person in Asia who pays an electricity bill, fills a gas tank, buys food at a market, or works in a factory. The longer this war continues, the deeper the energy crisis becomes. And the deeper the energy crisis becomes, the more ordinary lives across Asia are going to be upended in ways that are very real and very painful. This is the moment where the geography of a 33-kilometer waterway becomes the geography of your daily life. And right now, that waterway is closed, a war is raging, and nobody has a clear plan for what happens next.